welcome to everybody that's joined today. We have a lovely selection of members, students and staff of the Institute. So you're all very welcome to our Stress Busters webinar hosted by Thrive, which of course is your in-house wellbeing hub. And I might just pop that into the chat there so you can have a quick look at it before Carmel kicks off. So this is, of course, Mental Health Month this month. So we were very keen to sort of shine a spotlight on mental health, of course, and of course, the stress that we're all feeling that ebbs and flows during our daily lives. And really, we wanted to also highlight those supports that are available on the hub. So you'll see those there. So today we're delighted to welcome Carmel Farnan. And Carmel is a registered psychologist. She's had a previous career in the financial services. So you'll know this landscape very well, Carmel, I'm sure. And for the past 23 years, she has been involved in teaching positive psychology and well-being to corporate audiences internationally and runs a private clinical practice here in Dublin. So a very busy woman by all accounts. Carmel is going to provide us with a number of tools that will help manage our thinking to reduce worry, anxiety and tension. It's going to increase our focus and attention levels and break the habits of worrying and overthinking. And of course, decreasing those stress levels in both our professional and our personal lives. So that towards the end, Carmel's going to guide us through a sort of a short relaxation practice that you can kind of take away and use again. And we'll have time for Q&A as usual at the end. So if you have any questions, around that sort of stress management in your lives, please feel free to pop something into the Q&A box and we'll get to those at the end. So again, Carmel, you're very welcome, and I'll hand over to you to kick off. So thank you very much.
Thanks very much, Dee. Yeah, so I mean, I suppose both professionally and personally, I have walked the path that I'm talking and that I'm passing on to people. So I worked in corporate, as Dee said there, for a long number of years. And what I found, and I'll explain this to you more as we go through, was that I was becoming more of a worrier, greater anxiety. I ended up working in IT. I did do accountancy training. I have to be honest and say I didn't finish it, and ended up in IT, and it was coming up to the year 2000 and the stress levels were building and building. So I realized very quickly that I needed to start looking at my own mind, and because other people were coping much better with stress than I was. So I began to be very interested in the area of positive psychology. And once I discovered that, I can honestly say it's like I have two lives, and one is before that and one is after it. And the afterlife is much, much better. I'd highly recommend it. So today is going to be very practical. I'm going to give you tools that you can start using right today. So the direction that psychology took in around 1999 was that previously it would always look at what the problems were, what the issues were, going deeper and deeper into the problem. And in 1999, the movement came and they kind of said, well, look, what about all the happy people in the world? What about the people who are resilient, who are living at much lower levels of stress, people who are flourishing? And they said, if we can look at those people and see what they are doing to keep themselves feeling well, maybe we can devise a toolkit for them, and give it over to the people who aren't doing so well in life. And it became known as the Positivity Toolkit. And they passed that on to the people maybe that were struggling, and they started using those practices, and they suddenly became what people in positive psychology would talk about flourishing. So much less stress, greater focus, better resilience, and much more the ability to live in the present moment. And I can talk about that. So, I mean, I think we have to recognize and identify that what we have lived through since March 2020. And it's only now that really the psychological impact of that is being recognized, because to our brain, that was something very new, was something very frightening. And it can take even 2 years after something traumatic like that for our base level of stress to come back down. Now, throughout that, it wasn't just the pandemic, but there was the change in your working circumstances. There was maybe people working from home, that if there were children, you're trying to juggle home and work. And then for other people, there was great loneliness. So it was different for different people. So it really is a time of that we look and try and build in much greater self-care. But everything comes from what we think. We can do all the self-care, the external stuff, but if we don't have control over our own mind, and we've gone through an education system, maybe 14 years, 18 years when you've done third level education, but it's really not, nobody has taught how their minds work. So starting off, the most important thing I can say to you about the mind is that you can only think one thought at once. So no matter what big worry or stress, or you're thinking about deadlines coming up or exams maybe, or a work project and that, if we try and dismantle it and say, well, look, we do have control over the next thought that we think. Now you have 60,000 thoughts every day, roughly. I've seen estimates of 80,000, but our minds are very, very busy. So if we can begin to just deal with things on a moment by moment basis, on a thought by thought basis, and some of those thinking traps and unhelpful thinking styles begin, there's two separate words as such, two lots of two words. One of them is what if. So watch out when your mind lands onto anything to do with what if, because we have a thing called the negativity bias of the mind. And that's just how we're made, Mother Nature. So we still have a caveman brain. So your brain is always scanning for what's wrong. It's always looking for a threat and anything, because it takes everything as a life or death situation. So while it might be a tax deadline you have or a forthcoming exam, once your mind starts going, what if? So what if I don't meet that deadline? What if I don't pass this exam? And your mind doesn't know what's real or imagined. So when it begins to say, what if, it brings you into all different worrying scenarios. And our mind is also like a train with many, many carriages, or you could say it's like a filing cabinet. And say if you had a filing cabinet with positive thoughts and memories and thoughts of the future, and you had a negative one, whichever one of those you go into, you're going to access more and more and more files. So it's really important. What you can do is to look and say that you have an internal guidance system of your feelings. So our feelings are like a barometer to show what our thinking is doing. Our natural state is to feel calm, relaxed, just more carefree. That's the way we're born, nearly like a young child. We still have that part of us accessible inside of us. If we're not feeling like that, if we're feeling off kilter, it's showing what our thinking is doing. So it's like what I was saying there in my own personal professional career. I could see other people around me obviously didn't have as many what if thoughts because they weren't operating at the high level of stress that I was. So it's not the external circumstance that determines how we feel. It's the thoughts inside that we have. So that's good news, because what that means is that we can change what we think. We can absolutely change what we think. We now know that the brain is totally plastic. Before it was thought that it developed up to the age of 25, stayed the same until in later years where we'd have maybe cognitive decline. Now we know that we can shape our brain, we can retrain our brain, we can design, we can sculpt our brain moment by what we focus on. So the other two words are if only. So we have what if is leading us into negative thoughts of the future. Because even if you thought, oh, what if I won the lotto? That doesn't last very long thinking that, because Mother Nature hasn't designed us to dwell on the positive at the moment. Now, the if only thoughts relate to the past. So it could be, oh, I don't know, if only I had done SEMA management accounting instead of chartered, or if only I had have moved into that apartment, or if only I had gone traveling before I started studying, or various things. So we can end up spending a lot of time, our mind is hopping between the past, regrets about the past, and also then worries about the future. So we end up spending very little time actually doing what we're doing. So sometimes I say to myself, if somebody was making a video of me right now, what would it look like I was doing? So I'm giving a talk here, I'm giving a presentation. So because the spotlight is on me, I'm not going to be able to sit here and think, oh, if only this in the past, or what if in the future, and the project I have to do and the deadlines I have. I'm very lucky in my job, doing this type of work, that I have to spend a lot of time in the present moment. So the other thing there, so that in summary about that part, watch out for those what ifs and if onlys. And once you cut down on the number of those, and even when I got into training my own brain there, so it's what, maybe 25 years ago now, I think, I put loads of Post-its around the place, and I had one on my computer in work, and I put the word concentrate up. So that meant for me, I was to concentrate, was my head actually with me doing what I was doing. I'd have it on the mirror, I'd have it on the car dashboard, and all of those things in a very practical way. Every time I checked in to what my thoughts were doing, I was rarely fully connected with what I was doing. Now, there's a lot of research at the moment showing that a wandering mind is an unhappy mind. And they reckon that the neuroscientists would say that only about 50% of the time are we connected with what we're doing, are we living in the present moment. And the other 50% of the time our mind is wandering. And then because of the negativity bias of the mind, we end up mind wandering onto negatives, either imagined ones of the future or real ones from the past. So the more you can focus, that word focus is very important. The more you can focus on what you're doing. So there's a saying in neuroscience that says the brain is Teflon for pleasure, Velcro for pain. So it's like your Teflon frying pan. The good slides off, but the bad sticks. And what we focus on grows. Neuroscience says the neurons that fire together wire together. So we've billions and billions of neurons, which are just brain cells. So when you don't use them, when you don't use particular thoughts, they die off through a lack of attention. So you can think back maybe to a subject that you might have done for your junior cert or your intercert. And if you haven't studied it in the intervening years, and if I was to suddenly produce that junior cert paper and say, well, here's your Spanish or your geography, well, you're not going to get the same mark in that today because you haven't referred to the thoughts. So even like I am in clinical practice and I would see people one-to-one. So say even if people were coming with anxiety or depression or various things, that's the theory that I'm using with them. Look, don't keep on going into those thoughts and they will die off through a lack of attention. So it doesn't matter whether it's milder worry, whether it's worry about exams, whether it's worry about a project or a deadline that you have to meet. Because we're only 50% in the present moment, the other 50% means where our mind is wandering, that's where we're falling down in terms of productivity. That's where we're falling down in terms of study ability, because that 50% of our mind is being hijacked by the what if thoughts and the if only thoughts. Now, there's a very good thing, and there's a book that I'd recommend. It's not something you'd sit down and that you'd read from cover to cover. It's more, you might read a chapter here and there, and it's called Flow, The Psychology of Happiness. That's the name of the book, the full name. And if you're feeling very stressed, anxious, worried, just feeling there's a lot of negative, and particularly we're all going to have life situations outside of COVID and pandemics. Normal life was happening at the same time as well. And part of that life process is that we do have challenging situations or things that maybe we wish didn't happen to us. So whenever I have any of those kind of episodes in my own life, I always reach for what are known as flow activities. And that's a really good thing for mental well-being. So flow activities, and I remember attending a seminar about this, And what we were asked to do was to write down 100 things that we like to do, make a list of those. And at the time I thought, 100 things I like to do. I haven't got 100 things. And being honest, I only got as far as 54 things, but I have that list. And that was about 25 years ago that I did that course. And whenever there is trouble or strife or pressure around, I reach for some of those things on my list, my flow activities. So some of the things on those lists would be things that you just like to do, but the official definition of flow, and the happiest people in the world live a lot more in this flow where thoughts are just flowing. But the definition of a flow activity would be something that you don't notice time passing. And for many people, it was interesting with the research, what they found was that people were experiencing flow in work, which they hadn't anticipated was going to be the results of the research. So it's only if you like your job that you're going to move into flow in your job. And there's outside of being in flow, being in flow means you just don't notice time passing. You're so fully absorbed with what you're doing that you don't notice time passing. If your job is too stressful, maybe if you don't have the skill set to do it, maybe you're only a trainee, then you're not going to be in flow because this is all new. Your mind is interpreting that as, oh, this is new, this is a challenge, this is something outside the known, we better protect. So a bit of the fight or flight will come in. The other time you don't experience flow in work is if your job isn't challenging enough for you, so your skill set is too high, or maybe if you're doing a lower grade job than where you're actually stretched to mentally. So there's common things come up, and I'd highly recommend that you would write out a list of as many as you can. Sometimes when I'm giving courses, I say to people, write 25. Some people can write 25 down, no bother. So I'd be aiming up towards the 50. Now, if you're into sports or anything like that, what you will find is that in the sports world, it's called the zone. The top athletes and everything will talk about that. But common things that come up could be listening to music, it could be reading, cooking, gardening. Somebody was saying to me going out on their motorbike was a flow activity for them. Swimming, everybody has different things, but your measure of whether it's flow or not is that you nearly miss clock time. You don't notice that you're fully absorbed in what you're doing. So your thinking actually stops, bar the thinking required for you to engage with that activity. So I don't let a day of my life go by now where I don't have flow at all. And if you're very stressed or you've negative life circumstances, usually what happens is that people stop doing their flow activities and they're slipping down this funnel. So think of well-being as a funnel. So right up the top of the funnel, you would have, absolutely, you have your work, you have different things that keep you happy. That's why people struggle so badly in the pandemic, because they're locked into houses and a lot of their flow activities were taken away from them. And particularly in Ireland, it is important that we have flow activities for different weathers because one of mine is sea swimming. Now, it's not as much of a flow when it comes to December and January, even though I still do it, but it's not top of my list at all, where in the summer it's much more enjoyable. And then we're losing things from our list of flow. So maybe at one stage, going to nightclubs could have been a flow. Then as you move on in life a bit, that could be your worst nightmare. That would be my worst nightmare. So we have to keep on adjusting our list. So, yeah, think of that idea of sometimes a good thing to ask yourself is, am I thinking or am I living? So the unhappiest people in the world live up in their heads an awful lot more. And particularly there in accountancy, and I know because I have one of these brains myself, I would have a very logical, analytical left brain. And that's fantastic for accounts. And, you know, there's nothing more I love than doing Excel spreadsheets and drilling down deeper and formulas and all of that. but it's not a good skill to extrapolate out into your personal life, because when you apply that analytical mind to worries, then what you focus on grows. That's what the neuroscience now says to us. What you focus on grows, just like your geography that you lost because you didn't focus on the thoughts of it in the intervening years after junior cert. So too will the ability to worry. You won't have as many worrying thoughts when you spend more time in the present moment. So that can be deliberate. One of the things that I highly recommend, and I do this as many days as I can, is to go for a walk using your 5 senses. So I would think of that walk as a little holiday in my head. I'm not going walking to plan and go through my to-do list or to ruminate over what has happened in the past or what might happen in the future. I deliberately keep on coming out of my head and be as present as I can in the walk. So you do that by using your 5 senses. So that's what you see, hear, feel, taste, and smell. And then I would do about 15 seconds on each of those senses. In that order: see, hear, feel, taste, smell. And then I would keep on looping. I would start again with see, hear, feel, taste, smell. And now there's absolutely no way that you will get 20 minutes out of your head. The person who can focus the most, that has been measured, can focus for 5 minutes on doing what they're actually doing, keeping their attention on one thing. But each moment that you practice this, what happens is you have that connection. Once the thinking and the analytical mind stops temporarily, it'll never stop completely, but you have access to that part inside you, and it's known in psychology as your core being. So that part of you is always calm, always relaxed, always at ease, always happy, in fact. So as you practice coming out of that thinking mind, you're growing that connection with that part of you. And that part of you is just like the sun today. Well, where I am, it's very cloudy, but the sun isn't gone. It's just behind those dark clouds. And that's really what our thoughts are like if we move into negative thoughts. And we have an automatic pilot in our mind. So what we focus on the most is going to pop up automatically. So that's why giving yourself that break out of the overthinking, and particularly in the line of work you're in there, because you have many, many deadlines. So you're going, maybe somebody who's project-based that has a 6-month project delivery might not have the same stress levels as somebody who's going through maybe monthly deadlines then, or you have year-end deadlines. So you'll hit that peak maybe once a year, but maybe once a month you're moving into that stress. So try and bring some of these. Later on, what I'll be doing, I'll show you a relaxation type of breathing as well. We'll experience that. So you'll see how quickly that you're able to move from the overthinking mind, the analytical mind, just back more into the present moment. So definitely your feelings are the barometer to show you what your thinking is doing. And sometimes I put it in the way that your mind doesn't know what's real or imagined. So it can be, you can have lived one of those tax deadlines 100 times in your mind, and your mind and your body, because your thoughts are making your feelings, your mind and your body then have pre-suffered. So you've lived that 100 times. Maybe the deadline is over, and then you start thinking, oh gosh, and hopefully that's over, but there's another deadline coming. So we can be pre-suffering or post-suffering. So we're making things, we're magnifying things unnecessarily, and we're suffering through them many, many times. And sometimes I would say to people about when, like, our thoughts are like a film, it's like a DVD that runs in our head. And I would say to people, well, would you go to the local cinema and go and see a film that you didn't like, sit through every showing of it, and that film is making you feel unhappy? Buy a DVD of it, come home and start playing the DVD again. So try and watch that. Just watch what your feelings are telling you about what your thinking is doing. There's also a thing called comparative thinking. And this can be something, it can happen, it can be in personal life, and social media has a big role to play in this, or it can be in your professional life where you might be looking at maybe, somebody going up the career ladder, or somebody is very capable at doing stuff and that. Well, we all have 168 hours in the week. So in terms of stress management, we have to look and think of that 168 hours as nearly like a pie chart or something like that. And how are you going to divide that up? Because you might have 8 hours in work, sometimes longer if there's deadlines. We really should be sleeping for 8 hours as well. We do need that. And then we have 8 other hours in which that's the rest of our life. So how are you going to allocate those portions of the pie there? So if somebody is very capable at work and they're putting in all the hours at work, well, they're not putting in the hours maybe into a relationship or friendships or children. So don't ever compare yourself. You're meant to be you. And a lot of times that comparative thinking can switch on there. So watch out for that. Where I spoke earlier about the toolkit from positive psychology, one of the things they speak about there is positivity ratio. So this is you now being the sculptor of your thoughts, of deciding what thoughts you're going to think, what thoughts you want to let go of, because sometimes our thoughts aren't even our own. We're operating out of all these thoughts that can have been handed down to you by your nationality. If you're Irish, if you're a different culture, it can be handed down by your parents, for sure, by the fact that gender, your age, where maybe younger people, they would allocate a lot more time to technology in those 168 hours maybe than I would. Or say even your age very much gives you certain thoughts, because say when I was growing up, if I saw somebody, or if I had holes in my jeans, people might think, gosh, like she must be from a very poor family that can't afford proper jeans. Whereas now it's the height of fashion to have, openings in your jeans, or wear the baseball cap backwards. So try and look at the thoughts that come up within you and say, well, do I want to keep that thought? Just say if there was maybe an inferiority complex. Well, I know certainly when I was working in corporate, and say from my background, I would have gotten negative thoughts handed to me, not in the corporate world, but outside of that. And I would have felt very ill at ease in doing presentations, because I had that thought of people are going to be looking at me and judging me, but nobody is looking at you and judging you as harshly as you are yourself. So try and watch, this is it, your own self-talk, and say to yourself, is what I'm thinking about myself, would I say that to somebody else? Would that other person keep speaking to me? Would they want to be my friend? Would they want to be my colleague? If I spoke out loud to them, the type of thing that I say to myself. And particularly when you wake up in the morning, what happens is that in order for you to wake up, your body is flooded with cortisol. So cortisol is a stress hormone. And I'm sure everybody can relate to this, that you wake up in the morning and your conscious mind hasn't fully woken up yet, because it goes asleep when you go asleep. And you're there for a few seconds, all happy. And then all of a sudden you realize something that's going on in your life, and maybe of a negative nature. And then more of those stress hormones, adrenaline and cortisol, are flooding the system. But you already have the cortisol. You get a pump of cortisol, that stress hormone, to wake you up in the morning. So it's really important what thoughts you begin to have when you do wake up, because what you're trying to do is to let that cortisol abate, come down of its own accord without you adding to it. So if you are, say, going through a challenging time or you're a bit stressed about stuff, I always say to people, once the eyes are open, get your feet on the floor, because lying in bed, the mind is going to go, because Mother Nature has made us with this negativity bias. And that's why when you wake up at night, maybe if you have stuff going on in your life, there's no distractions. So everything can seem much worse at night. So watch particularly when you wake up in the morning. It's not a good idea to focus on the news. It's not a good idea to focus on anything negative that might be happening in your own life. And usually social media isn't the greatest thing to be on first thing in the morning. So myself personally, I do a meditation first thing in the morning. I set my alarm and I do half an hour meditation, because I find that starts me off in a different zone for the day. So, I mean, I'll give a link to various meditations that I've recorded. And if you want to download them after this, you'll be able to do that. The other thing that affects your well-being would be your sleep quality. So if you don't sleep properly, you're not going to function well mentally, and the quality of your thoughts is impacted in a very negative way. So there is research to support sleep learning. So again, you have to watch, particularly just before you go to bed at night, what you're allowing your mind to rest upon. So within positive psychology, in the toolkit, one of the things they recommend is to practice gratitude. So this ties in with another part of that toolkit, which is called the positivity ratio. So the positivity ratio is that it's not to say that we can't have negative thoughts, genuine negative thoughts, because sometimes there are things that we do feel negative about. But in order for that not to be swamped by our negative thoughts, it has been found through research that we need to have a minimum of 3 positives to balance up that one negative. So the negative thought is so strong because, remember, your brain just wants to keep you alive. So it pays much more attention to the negative than the positive, whether that negative is real or imagined. So there's various estimates of that positivity ratio. And the first one was 3-to-1. Then they kind of said, well, look, 5-to-1 is even better. 7-to-1 is even better again. But starting off, go for the 3-to-1. So what I do, before I go to sleep at night, and this is coming into the gratitude from positive psychology as well, I write down, I have a little book, and I'll write 7 good things that happened today. So that's really a practical thing, because as I go through the day, I know I'm going to have to write in my book, and therefore I'm scanning for the positives during the day. So I'm getting like a double hit. I'm going to experience them deeper, because what you focus on grows, and I'm paying attention to those. And then I'm going to write about them as I'm going to sleep at night. And then the sleep learning is that what we focus on before we go to sleep at night, that can continue in your unconscious mind when you go to sleep. The other thing is, for around sleep hygiene, is to watch about 90 minutes before you go asleep, before your bedtime. You should come off all blue light technology, because before you go to sleep, your brain starts producing a hormone called melatonin, which is the sleep hormone. And what happens when we're using the phones and iPads and all of that is that the blue light is knocking out that hormone. And that's why you can't actually go to sleep as easily. So I would recommend there at night, there's a great saying in positive psychology, and I love it. It's saying that we can be informed but not saturated. And in that, they're talking about your exposure to the media. They say, watch your media diet. So sometimes I'm amused. I might be just watching TV and maybe the 9 o'clock news comes on or something like that. And they say, oh, good evening, here's the 9 o'clock news. And you're thinking, well, it was a really good evening until you've come on to tell me why it's not a good evening. So I wouldn't watch things like current affairs or news or any of those kind of murder programs or anything like that, or crime scenes, CSI and all of those things, because your brain is absorbing that and it's focusing on that as you go to sleep. So just be very careful. If you can, try and keep the evening viewing in a lighter frame there. Yeah, just one thing there, multitasking, particularly if you're busy in work. And it's said that women are much better at multitasking than men. Nobody is good at multitasking. The brain cannot multitask. What it's doing is it's switching from one task to the other, to the other, to the other. So it's like a train coming down a track to a junction, and the train is flying along, slows down as it comes to the junction, might turn left down the track, and then it takes time for momentum to build up again. So it's said that when you switch tasks, and people do think they're multitasking, but they're not. It's like having loads of different tabs open on a phone or a laptop or something like that. It's draining the charge the whole time. But it is said that it takes about 15 minutes for you to get back to the same level of focus that you had. So yeah, that's just one of those things there. I'm just looking at a few little notes here. There, want to make sure I've covered everything. Yes, I have covered everything there, the main things. Now I know we're going to be doing questions there, maybe around 10 to 1. So what I thought maybe we might do is let you have an experience of how quickly you can come out of that overthinking mind into just that more relaxed part of you, reconnecting with that part that's always relaxed. So just before we start, I'll tell you another thing that I use a lot, because sometimes if I'm doing one-to-one therapy with clients, I could end up seeing 6 clients in a day. And by nature of therapy, nobody's coming to therapy when they're at their happiest. So it can be heavy going, and you want to make sure that the 6th person is getting the same as the first person in the morning. So I use a little practice, and I'd recommend you do this at any time. And it's called 2 feet, 1 breath. And literally you're just putting your 2 feet on the floor, becoming aware of your 2 feet on the floor, and you take 1 breath in and 1 breath out. So if you can do a longer exhale, what that's doing is it's throwing off all the tension. Now you could, if you had a couple of minutes, you could go through that and do it 10 times. Focus on my feet, feel my feet on the floor, 1 breath in, 1 breath out. So I know as well, there's an awful lot of people aren't into meditation and aren't into doing relaxation. So for people that aren't, there's no rule that says you have to do that. What you do instead is do that walking that I was talking about at the beginning, of using your 5 senses. That's the absolute equivalent of doing a meditation, but it's a moving meditation. It's keeping your mind in the present moment. If ever you felt very agitated, stressed, all these negative emotions that we can have, any movement will get rid of the adrenaline and the cortisol. So even if you ran up the stairs at home or in work, or went out your back garden, did a few jumping jacks or something like that, or something physical, housework, anything like that. Because when you think, we are still like the caveman got flooded with the cortisol and adrenaline because he had to run away from the lion or the tiger that was about to savage him. So when you're really stressed, you're not going to feel like doing meditation, because Mother Nature didn't want the caveman lying down outside his cave going, oh, that might just be a little rabbit out for its morning stroll, and I think I'll do a spot of meditation. So that's why when you need it the most, generally you're not able to access it. And that's nothing to do with you. It's merely a flaw in Mother Nature there. So yeah, 2 feet, 1 breath. That's one of them. Your mindful walking. Definitely watch out for what ifs, if onlys, and try and write out your list of flow activities. And the more that your stress levels or pressures are up, the more self-care you need. Think of that positivity ratio. So even if there was one aspect of your job that you don't really like, maybe all the deadlines, the 3-to-1 positivity ratio would say, well, focus on, well, the people that I work with are really nice, or my manager is very nice, and it pays my mortgage or my rent, and there's a social aspect. Now I'm going beyond 3. But you will find that once you start, it's like once you start writing those 3 or thinking of those 3, it's like you're into the positive filing cabinet, and more and more and more files become available to you. So it becomes quite addictive doing it that way. And even if you have children, it's very good, because their brain is so plastic, and getting them to focus on the good there. Or even if you're out with friends in a conversation, keep on steering the conversation towards what's good and what is happening that's good. So I'm conscious of the time for you. So what I'm going to do now, I'm going to move into this little relaxation, and it's to do with the breath. And there's another good book. It's by a guy called Dr. Herbert Benson, and it's called The Relaxation Response. And he was a GP in the States, and he discovered that when he did relaxation with his patients, that 90% of the issues, that the presenting issues, either disappeared or improved dramatically. So he gave up being a GP and started, sorry, I'm just looking at the chat there, started to be a stress management consultant instead. So it's a nice little read, that little book. Now, so I will get started with this relaxation now. So if it's comfortable for you, just close your eyes. And the minute you close your eyes, so even if you didn't get to do a full relaxation, once you close your eyes, it's changing your brainwave. It's changing the brainwave activity, and you're moving into the alpha brainwave, and that's the first stage of relaxation. So you could just close your eyes anytime. So for this purpose, if it's comfortable for you, have your feet flat on the floor, and even let your hands rest in your lap with the palms facing upwards. And it's good for, we all have this energy inside our body that digests our food, that does our breathing for us, grows our hair. So that moves up and down along your spine. So if you can have your spine as straight as possible, it allows that energy to move more freely. Okay, so we'll start now, and starting off by bringing your mind into the room. So anything you have going on in your life, anything at all, positive or negative, imagining that that's parked outside your door, and just leaving this clear space for your body and your mind to relax. And you're not even going to try and relax, because any effort that you put in is counterproductive. That part inside you knows how to be fully relaxed without any help at all. So starting off now by focusing on your feet and the soles of your feet, and imagining that the soles of your feet could open out. Through that area then, any stress, worry, tension, anything of a negative nature now, imagining that just passing out through the soles of your feet. And if it's helpful, you could imagine that as a black smoke now, just billowing out through the soles of your feet and taking away anything that's not you in your body and in your mind. All of that leaving your body as you begin to relax. And for sure, your mind is going to wander as we're going through this relaxation, and that's no harm. That's what minds do. Once you notice that has happened, gently bring your mind back, just to focus on what I'm saying or what you're experiencing. So moving up then through your calves, imagining all the calf muscles smoothing out and easing out now. Focusing on your legs, the backs of your legs, feeling your legs relaxing. As you focus on your hips, feeling that area just sinking down, blending with the chair when you're sitting or lying. Into your lower back, where you can sometimes hold tightness and tension. Imagining all of that breaking down, dissolving, draining away, just leaving your body, and you're just sinking down deeper and deeper now. All along your spine, relaxing the muscles either side of your spine, easing out completely as you're drifting, floating down and down into this lovely relaxed place inside. Moving up to the area of your shoulders, and again, that's where we can hold tightness or tension. And as you focus there, just feeling your shoulders dropping down and down and down now. Feeling yourself just relaxing, very easy, very effortless way. And up through your neck, through your head, and focusing now on the area of the forehead. And as you focus there, you're imagining this warm hand massaging your forehead from side to side. Very gently rubbing away any tightness, any tension. Feeling your forehead area smoothing out completely now. And as your body relaxes, your mind relaxes as well. So body and mind drifting down deeper and deeper now. All along your face relaxing. Moving down into the chest. And what you're going to do now, at your own pace, you're breathing in for a count of 4. So you're going in your mind 1, 2, 3, 4, holding it for a count of 4 if you can. So 1, 2, 3, 4, you're holding. And then a big breath out as if you're blowing out a candle out through your mouth to a count of 8. So going 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, and 8. So again, in your own time, you don't have to keep up with me, but in your own time, breathing in for the count of 4. So you're silently counting to 4 in your mind. Once you reach 4, you're counting another 4. So holding that breath for 4. And then exhaling out through your mouth for a count of 8. And that long exhale is what's calming down your whole nervous system, body and mind now. So going again, breathing in for a count of 4 in your own time. Holding it for a count of 4. And breathing out through your mouth for a count of 8. Okay. And continuing on now, we're just going back to normal breathing, but you're focusing on the area of your tummy and imagining that everything inside your tummy relaxing. You're drifting and floating down and down and down even further now. All of this happening in a very easy, very effortless way. Down through your legs. You might even feel your legs heavy. Some people will feel them light, but feeling your legs relaxing completely. And now you're focusing on your arms, all the way down your arms, all those muscles relaxing out, all the way into your hands, right the way down into your fingers, just one by one by one by one. feeling your fingers easing out now, feeling your whole body very, very relaxed now. This lovely place inside that's accessible to you at any moment. So just now becoming aware of all the different parts of your body that are touching off the chair or whatever surface you're on. Just feeling all those touch points. And as I count you from 3 back up to 1, you can open your eyes feeling wonderfully well inside. So coming from 3, slowly up to 2, and then coming up to 1, up to normal level. And opening your eyes, feeling really good inside.
That was lovely, Cormac.
It's amazing, isn't it, how quickly?
Yeah,
Just those few
a
moments.
lovely feeling of Zen, absolutely.
Yeah.
And you have a lovely voice, a very soporific voice. So I hope people haven't fallen asleep. You can wake up now.
Yeah.
There was so many practical takeaways today, which I think was really, really important for everybody, because look, we all know what we're meant to be doing with stress and all the rest of it. And I just love your idea of scanning your day for the positives and popping them into that filing cabinet. And it's such a simple idea. And we're all kind of, there's so much uncertainty out there at the moment. We're dealing with a lot on a kind of a collective and an individual basis. So I think it's really, really nice to just look at all the good stuff that's going on for us individually. So we can fill up those filing cabinets. So thank you so much for that. So look, we do have a couple of questions. First and foremost, just you mentioned the book, the 2 books. So the first one was Flow, and I just want to check it was the chap.
Mihaly Csikszentmihalyi.
I think that's the one I put up there, and I think then the other one.
Am I able to see it in the chat?
Yeah, it's in the chat.
Do I look in the chat?
Mihaly, yes, it is. It's a nice.
Yes, that's him. Yeah.
And then the other one was the final book that you mentioned there, and I can go and off and have a look at that and pop it into the chat as well. You mentioned a book there at the end, and it was Herbert, I think.
Herbert Benson is his name. And you know what? I'll just put in this other book, which is great. Oh no, I can't put it in. It's called Stop Thinking, Start Living. And
Richard Carlson, is it?
Richard Carlson, yeah.
Okay,
little
great.
Small book. You get it in Eason's even. And I think it's the best book I've ever read.
Wow. That's high praise indeed. So I'm going to pop that in as well. So there is a question in there to get the ball rolling. We've only a few minutes left, but sure, we'll see what we can do here. I'm just going to pull this up here. Sorry. So any tips for anxiety when starting a new job? Great question.
Yeah. Do you know what? It's the same for everything. For anything. It's how we use our mind. So obviously starting a new job, anxiety levels are going to be high because Mother Nature is thinking, they're stepping out into the unknown. Oh my God, keep them back here in the job that they know better. The devil you know than the devil you don't. So our own brain is hardwired to work against us. So one thing you could do is that idea that I was saying about pre-suffering and post-suffering. So pre-suffering in terms of starting the new job. So you could think, it's Tuesday, this day next week, I'll be in my new job. Your mind just hears, I'm in my new job. And all the stress hormones come. So the moment that starts, you say to yourself, actually, it's only Tuesday, the 4th of October, not the 11th. So get my head back now into what I'm doing here. Do flow activities, because in the week, say, that helps your mind switch off automatically. It brings you into the present, out of the thinking mind. Another good thing, if you felt sometimes when we're doing something new, our confidence can be, am I going to be okay? So you could use the positivity ratio in a different way, because you think, this job could go wrong. Now, what are 5 good things about me? What are 5 things I got in my feedback, performance reviews? What are 5 compliments I ever got? So it's a very practical thing that you can use for anything. So instead of doing 5 things I'm grateful for, or you could do 5 things or 3 things that are going to be great about this new job. the one thing could be, oh, I'm very shy, I don't like meeting new people. And the three things are, well, I'm getting an increase and my job title is better, and I'm really on my career path. And yeah.
Great, very practical things, and actually just exactly as you're saying, to kind of focus on the positive as opposed to all the negative things that are associated with the new job. So that's really, really good. Yeah. So another question just coming in here are meditation apps. So apart from Headspace, is there any that you'd recommend?
I don't use it myself, but apparently there's a Calm, it's called, and I think there's another one, Breathe, and I have a feeling there's something called Zen. I'm not sure if they're paid ones or not. I will give a link. I'll email it in to Dee, and I've recorded I think there's about 20 meditations on SoundCloud that I've recorded, and some of them are actually for children, but adults use them as well. They're little short meditations, like the worry tree, and we're exactly the same. Our mind, a child's mind and our mind works the same.
Brilliant. That's great. I look forward to those myself, Cormac. Yeah. Thank you very much. So we have another question in here. Are the flow activities things you like to do and actually do sometimes, or things that you would like to do if you had more time? So the idea that, are you only doing these things if you have the time, really? So are your flow activities extra that you have to like squeeze into your day, or they should be things that you're...
It's the other way around. I make sure, and whether that's just reading a book or something, there wouldn't be a day would go by that I wouldn't have flow activities. But when I was writing out my list, I was really struggling. I got to 54 at a push, and I began to think then, well, what used I like? And one thing I used to love was tennis and cycling, so I went and I bought a bike and I started up tennis again. So that can help you to say, what used I like? But definitely, I mean, I would have things on it like maybe lighting candles, buying lilies. So they're not strictly flow, candles and lilies, but in psychology, it's called uptime. So if you create your environment into something that you like, it's that self-care again. It's making you feel better sitting there.
Yeah, and I think the environment is often overlooked. Our own environments are very much overlooked, and actually they can give you so much joy and bring you down to a kind of a calmer state and those kind of things, so I think the candles and the lilies, I could totally relate to that. I think that's a really simple thing that you could do. Doesn't need kind of buying that time or whatever. Even
clutter. Your desk and work, if you can keep your desk clear, if you can keep your home space that bit clearer, because if we're living in the clutter, our mind is cluttered, and then you're using up all your thoughts going, I must tidy that bookcase, oh gosh, I must go to the charity shop, and you're wearing your mind out with all these extra thoughts that we've enough to be doing in the day without. So that's something I do. If I'm like, I must clear out that wardrobe, I try and do it immediately. Otherwise, I could have
if he's playing around on your
thoughts over the week. I must do it.
I know, we're all terrible for that. Guilty of that completely. I know, quickly. Absolutely. Spring into action, exactly. Well, look, I think we're at the top of the hour, Cormac. So so it's gone very quickly, but it's been absolutely lovely and really rewarding. I think, as I said before, lots of takeaways for everybody. And of course, this is recorded. So please do go and pop into Thrive for other events that we run, and you'll see them all there. We have a live calendar. And Cormac, just remains for me to say thank you so much for coming along today. Really, really enjoyable, and hopefully our attendees found lots of valuable takeaways also. And we'll see you again, hopefully in person.
Thank you so much for having me. Yeah,
absolutely. All right, and thanks to everybody for joining.
Thanks a million, everybody.
Look after yourselves.
Okay.
Thanks a million. Take care.
Bye.
Bye, everyone.
Bye-bye.
Bye.